$1 million in savings sounds like the finish line, but the reality is that it's often just a new beginning. I'm Mr. Greenvestor, and I want to show you why hitting that seven-figure mark without updating your strategy is actually one of the most dangerous moments for your finances. Most people assume that once they see those double commas in their bank account, the hard part of the race is finally over. However, the math tells a very different story because the habits that helped you build that pile will actively work against you the moment you stop working and start spending. Saving is all about growing the pile, while retiring is about protecting the flow, and those are two completely different skills to master. In this breakdown, we are going to look at exactly why that first million can be a trap and the specific system you need to spend your money safely without the constant fear of running out. We will cover how to manage your tax brackets, why waiting until age 70 to claim Social Security locks in a guaranteed 8% annual increase, and how to stop hidden fees from draining your accounts over a 30-year retirement. If this breakdown is helping you, consider following along and hitting subscribe for more practical steps. There is one hidden leak that drains more from million-dollar portfolios than major market crashes, and there is a good chance you are ignoring it right now. To understand how this trap works, we first need to look at the math behind the illusion. You likely spent nearly 2 decades making sacrifices to reach that million-dollar goal by working late, skipping vacations, and putting money away every single month. Now that you finally have a 7-figure account, you might expect to feel free, but instead, you feel paralyzed because the balance fluctuates every single day. You check your phone and see the market dropped $10,000 by Tuesday, which makes it feel genuinely difficult to justify booking a flight on Wednesday. That fear isn't irrational at all. It is actually a clear signal that your strategy needs to change to match your new reality. This is where the common belief about wealth starts to break down for most investors. People usually assume $1 million generates serious wealth in retirement, but the standard 4% rule says you can only safely pull out $40,000 in your first year. Once the government takes their cut of that $40,000, someone used to earning a professional salary will realize that this doesn't feel like security. It feels like a massive step backward. But the much bigger threat to your future isn't just the size of the number on the screen. It is the timing of what happens to that money. Sequence of returns risk is the real danger here, and it is a straightforward problem that carries permanent consequences for your lifestyle. If the stock market drops early in your retirement while you are pulling cash out to live, your portfolio takes damage that it may never truly recover from. When you are still working, a market crash is just a great buying opportunity where shares are cheap and your ongoing contributions let the recovery do the heavy lifting. When you are retired, that same crash forces you to sell shares at a loss just to pay for your groceries, and those shares are gone forever. Think of it like trying to dig a hole in dry, shifting sand. If the walls are sliding down while you are scooping, the hole collapses faster than you can clear it, and you end up needing twice the effort just to get half the result. Consider 2 people who have identical average returns over 30 years and saved the exact same amount of money. One person retires during a strong market run, while the other retires right before a significant drop, resulting in the second person running out of money a full decade early. They didn't make a single bad decision with their investments, but the timing worked against them in a way that destroyed their plan. Market drops are the loud threat that everyone watches for on the news. But the leaks that actually destroy retirement accounts work quietly while you are sleeping. The biggest threat to your retirement isn't a sudden, dramatic crash. It is the quiet, steady combination of taxes, fees, inflation, and government surcharges working together every month to drain your accounts while your attention is somewhere else. Let's go through each one. The first 2 leaks almost always work as a pair to shrink your buying power. If your $1 million sits in a traditional 401k or IRA, you don't actually own the full million because the government owns a significant chunk that comes due every time you make a withdrawal. That $40,000 you took out under the 4% rule shrinks the moment it hits your bank account, since every dollar counts as ordinary income. Now, when you add inflation on top of that, the rising cost of groceries and healthcare means you have to pull out even more money just to live the same life. These larger withdrawals push you into higher tax brackets, which gives the government a bigger cut and creates a cycle that accelerates until the damage is done. The third leak is the one that surprises people the most because a 1% annual management fee sounds so harmless. You might think that is a fair trade for professional help, but fees compound in reverse and eat away at your principal. In a bad year when your portfolio drops in value, you still pay that fee on the full balance, which means you are losing money twice. Over a 30-year retirement, that 1% doesn't just cost you 1% of your wealth. It costs you hundreds of thousands of dollars in growth that never happened because that money couldn't compound. The fourth leak is the Medicare IRMAA surcharge, and most people have never even heard of it until they get the bill in the mail. If your income crosses certain thresholds in retirement, the government automatically increases your Medicare Part B and Part D premiums. If you pull too much from your traditional accounts in a single year, you can trigger thousands of dollars in extra healthcare costs that have nothing to do with your actual health. It is essentially a penalty for withdrawing your own money at the wrong speed, and it catches a lot of people completely off guard. The fifth leak is psychological, and it does just as much damage as any part of the tax code. Without a clear plan for how your income works, most people default to hoarding their cash because they are so afraid of running out. They end up sitting on a 7-figure account while living like they are broke, even though the whole goal of saving was to fund a real life. Fear without a system doesn't actually protect your money. It just stops you from ever using it for the things you enjoy. The reality is that you aren't fighting just one enemy. You are fighting 5 of them at once, and they are all very quiet. The crash gets the headlines, but these leaks are what will actually get your retirement. Once you see the holes in the bucket, the answer isn't to try and pour money in faster. Saving harder won't fix a structural problem, so what you actually need is a completely different strategy for how money flows out of your portfolio. Most people spend their entire working life focused on growing the pile by throwing money into accounts and celebrating whenever the number gets bigger. That mindset works perfectly for 30 years of accumulation, but the moment you retire, it becomes the wrong game to play. The top tier of investors don't just save differently, they actually think differently about their assets. They stop measuring success by the total size of the pile and start building systems that control exactly how and when money flows out. Saving is what got you to $1 million in the first place. However, a completely different set of skills is required to keep you there. The first piece of that system is the bucket strategy. Instead of treating your portfolio as one lump sum that you draw from randomly, you divide it into 3 distinct sections based on when you need the money. The first bucket holds 1 to 2 years of living expenses in straight cash, so that you never have to sell a single share during a market downturn. The second bucket holds medium-term bonds or stable assets covering the next 3 to 5 years to provide modest growth with much lower swings. The third bucket is your long-term growth engine that stays invested in equities and is left alone to compound over the decades. When the market drops, you simply draw from bucket 1, while bucket 3 recovers, ensuring you never have to sell at the bottom. The second piece is using guardrails. The rigid 4% rule works as a baseline, but it doesn't account for the real world where the market fluctuates wildly from year to year. Dynamic withdrawals let you adjust your spending slightly based on how your investments are actually performing. If the market has a strong year, you might pull a bit more for a vacation, but if it drops, you trim your discretionary spending temporarily. Your core lifestyle stays intact either way because you built the system specifically to protect your basic needs. The third piece is tax control, and this is where most people leave serious money on the table. During the early years of retirement, your taxable income is often at its lowest point before Social Security and mandatory distributions kick in. That window is the perfect time to convert small amounts from your traditional retirement accounts into a Roth IRA. You pay a modest tax bill now at a lower rate to eliminate a much larger one later on. The goal is to fill the lower tax brackets strategically each year, rather than letting the government hand you a massive bill when you are older. The fourth piece is building an income floor. This means creating a layer of predictable income that covers your basic expenses regardless of what the stock market is doing. That could come from a dividend-focused portion of your portfolio, a simple fixed annuity, or by delaying Social Security until age 70 to lock in the highest payment. When your rent, utilities, and groceries are covered by income that arrives every month, every dollar above that floor becomes spending money that you can use without any guilt. These four pieces work together to create a plan that doesn't require a massive portfolio to succeed. Having a plan is the one thing that separates the people who spend their retirement worrying from the ones who actually enjoy their time. Picture someone who is 50 years old and just crossed the $1 million mark after 20 years of hard work. They are burned out and want to drop to part-time or take a sabbatical, and financially, they should be able to do it. But every time they sit down to run the numbers, they freeze up and change their mind. The problem isn't the balance in their account. The problem is the structure of their wealth. Their entire portfolio sits in a traditional 401k, which means every dollar they pull out gets taxed as income, and the after-tax number is always smaller than they want. They have no cash buffer, so any withdrawal they make comes directly from whatever the market is doing that day. A bad week at work, followed by a red week in the market, turns into a spiral of anxiety that keeps them stuck. They aren't actually trapped by the numbers, but they have no system telling them when it is safe to make a move. This is where they need to apply the pivot. Step 1 is carving out 3 years of living expenses in cash or short-term bonds to change their psychology immediately. Once that is done, the day-to-day market noise becomes irrelevant because their next 3 years of income is already sitting safely in the bank. Step 2 involves starting small Roth conversions during the years when their income drops to move money out of taxable accounts in controlled amounts. Step 3 is building a dividend base inside a taxable brokerage account, focused on companies with consistent payout histories. Within a few years, those dividends can cover monthly fixed costs, like groceries and insurance. That combination creates what you could call a permission system for your life. Because predictable income covers the basics and cash covers the next few years, you now have full psychological permission to use your growth money. You can book the trip or help a kid with a down payment without checking the market every morning to see if you can afford lunch. Now, imagine sitting down at your desk on a day when the market drops 2% across the board and feeling absolutely nothing. This isn't because you stopped caring about your money, but because the system you built means that drop won't touch your actual life for years. That calm isn't just luck. It is the direct result of separating your daily income from the market's daily mood. Building that structure takes some time and effort, but the first step is actually much simpler than most people expect. Hitting $1 million isn't the finish line of your financial journey. It is the exact moment you must stop being a saver and start being an income manager. Your homework is straightforward. Take your current balance, apply a 4% withdrawal rate, and then subtract what you expect to pay in taxes and fees. Write that real number down on a piece of paper. Most people find the number is smaller than they expected, but that is actually a useful realization. You can't fix a leak that you aren't willing to measure. See you on the next one. Cheers.